6 centuries. Longer than the Roman Empire, longer than the British Empire, longer than the United States has even existed. One superpower waged war after war across 3 continents without collapsing under the weight of its own ambition. And the secret wasn't magic, destiny, or military genius. It was money. Cold, disciplined, brilliantly engineered money. Welcome to a story most people never hear. How the Ottoman Empire financed 600 years of conflict without going bankrupt. How it built a machine where soldiers paid for themselves, where conquest generated revenue, where trade routes became rivers of gold, and where war was less a cost and more an investment that returned dividends for centuries. To understand this, we need to go back to the beginning, back to the dusty frontier of northwest Anatolia around 1299, where a small tribe under Osman, just a few thousand riders, found themselves positioned between collapsing empires and fading Mongol power. Most people imagine empire building as glory and steel. The Ottomans understood it as opportunity and cash flow. Every village captured meant wheat taxes. Every valley meant grazing fees. Every caravan route meant tolls. Every harbor meant import duties. Osman didn't just expand territory, he expanded revenue streams. By the time the Ottomans captured Bursa and later crossed into Europe, they were no longer raiders. They were landlords of the medieval world's most profitable geography, the crossroads of Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. And with every caravan from Venice to Persia, from Cairo to Budapest, the empire earned a fee. But geography alone cannot sustain an empire for 600 years. Many states sit on valuable land and still collapse. The Ottomans didn't just sit, they engineered. And their financial engineering began with a system so clever that modern economists still marvel at it, the Timar System. Imagine running a massive army with almost zero payroll. That's what the Ottomans did. Instead of paying cavalry salaries, they gave sipahis, the elite horsemen, the right to collect taxes from specific villages. The sipahi funded his horse, armor, weapons, and soldiers by collecting local revenue. The peasants got stable governance. The soldier stayed loyal because his income depended on the land. The state paid almost nothing. It was genius. It turned the army into a self-financing machine. In Europe, kings struggled to pay mercenaries, took loans at high interest, and collapsed when the bills came due. In the Ottoman world, the army generated its own cash. War didn't drain the treasury, it activated the engine. And just when you think the system couldn't get more innovative, the Ottomans introduced the Janissaries, the elite infantry corps built through the Devshirme system, where young boys from Christian villages were taken, trained, educated, and turned into the most disciplined soldiers in the region. Their origin was controversial, yes, but the financial logic behind them was unmatched. The state didn't pay for raising them from birth. By the time they entered military service, the expensive part of child-rearing had already been done by the conquered populations. The empire paid for training, equipment, and salaries later, but the huge lifetime cost of raising a soldier from infancy was bypassed. This gave the empire a low-cost but elite-standing army, something Europe didn't figure out until centuries later. With the self-financing cavalry on one side and the cost-efficient Janissaries on the other, the Ottomans had solved the single greatest financial problem of pre-modern states: how to maintain a large permanent army without destroying the treasury. But this was only one layer of the machine. The second layer was trade. The Ottoman Empire controlled the Bosporus, the Dardanelles, the Red Sea, the Eastern Mediterranean, and the caravan routes into Central Asia. If you wanted to move anything, silk from China, spices from India, horses from Arabia, carpets from Persia, weapons from Europe, you paid the Ottomans. The empire was a toll booth built on global commerce. It taxed caravans, ports, markets, ships, guilds, mines, and merchants. The treasury filled not because of miracles, but because of structure. To strengthen this further, the Ottomans created state monopolies: salt, tobacco, coffee, soap, leather, sometimes sugar, essential commodities people bought daily. These were controlled directly by the state, guaranteeing revenue even when war disrupted trade. It was the medieval version of Saudi Aramco or the Suez Canal Authority: reliable, centralized, predictable income. And then there was tribute. Many regions, Crimea, Moldavia, Wallachia, paid yearly tribute to the empire. They weren't fully conquered, so the Ottomans saved on administration, but they still received cash. Think of it as a subscription model. Pay annually or face invasion. It was cheaper for everyone to pay. Combine all these: Timars, Janissaries, trade tolls, monopolies, tribute, and you get a financial machine unmatched in the medieval world. Europe borrowed. The Ottomans earned. Europe paid mercenaries. The Ottomans incentivized soldiers. Europe raised taxes in crisis. The Ottomans designed systems where taxes collected themselves. And for centuries, this allowed the empire to fund campaigns from Vienna to Yemen, from Baghdad to Budapest, from Algeria to Arabia. But nothing lasts forever, not even the smartest financial system. By the 1600s and 1700s, the world changed. Trade routes shifted to the oceans once the Portuguese and later the Dutch discovered sea routes around Africa, bypassing Ottoman toll roads entirely. European industries exploded with gunpowder, artillery, and shipbuilding far faster than the Ottomans could reform. The Timar system began decaying as local tax holders abused power, overtaxed peasants, and became semi-independent warlords. The Janissaries, once the disciplined heart of the empire, became political kingmakers, corrupt, wealthy, resistant to reform, and in some periods acting more like street gangs than elite infantry. Their costs soared while their efficiency dropped. And when the Ottomans finally tried to modernize, build new armies, new fleets, new weapons, they faced something they had avoided for centuries: the need for cash salaries paid in hard currency. That's when the empire made its fatal mistake. It turned to foreign loans. European banks lent money at high interest, gaining leverage over the empire's finances. As debts grew, interest payments ballooned, and by 1881, the empire was forced to surrender control of its revenue streams to an international commission led by European powers, effectively losing economic sovereignty. The same empire that once financed centuries of war without borrowing was now trapped by debt. This wasn't just financial collapse, it was geopolitical humiliation, and the empire never recovered. The Ottoman story is not just a story of the past, it's a blueprint of the present. Look around the modern world, and you'll see the same systems wearing different clothes. The Timar lives on in privatized military contractors that offload government payroll. Trade tolls live on in maritime choke points from the Strait of Hormuz to the Bab el-Mandeb to the South China Sea. State monopolies live on in national oil companies, state-owned ports, and sovereign wealth funds. Tribute survives in the form of security agreements and foreign-based payments. And late, desperate borrowing. Well, you can see it in the national debts of dozens of modern states. The lesson is simple, brutal, and universal. Empires don't die when enemies invade. They die when the financial system collapses. The Ottomans thrived when tax systems were efficient, armies were self-financing, monopolies were strong, trade routes were controlled, and expenses were low. They crumbled when those systems failed, when soldiers became expensive, when trade bypassed their lands, when debt replaced discipline, and when foreign creditors owned the treasury. History doesn't repeat, but it rhymes, and the Ottoman Empire's 6th century rise and fall is one of the clearest warnings in the library of human civilization. If your economics fail, your power fails. If this changed the way you see history, subscribe, because the past isn't gone. It's alive, it's repeating, and it has more to teach us than most people realize.